You have the Democrats. I call them the Democrats. The Democrats. They're dumb. It's a new name. It's a very accurate name.
President Trump hammering Democrats with his favorite new nickname, the Democrats, while holding an impromptu news conference outside his massive ballroom construction site. This as his number 2, Vice President JD Vance, taking his war on fraud to the briefing room and absolutely steamrolling a reporter who turned a minute-and-a-half question into a TED Talk about Trump trading stocks.
That was a doozy. Before I answer your question, I want to just observe there are different ways to ask a question, okay? You could just ask a question, try to get your answer, or you could do like a speech where you say, you know, Mr. Vice President, you're a terrible human being, and so is the president, so is the entire cabinet. And then I'm like, what's your question? And then your question is, how dare you? Come on, man. Have a little bit of objectivity in the way that you ask these questions, because there were a lot of things in that speech masquerading as a question that didn't actually get asked.
And while Republicans fight fraud, Democrats are still fighting Trump. Gavin Newsom is trying to grease up his 2028 prospects by heading to D.C. today for what Kamala would surely call a no bad ideas summit.
Trump's not screwing around, and nor can we. Yeah, it's uncomfortable fighting fire with fire. Yes, we all want the better angels. Yes, we want the Sorkin sound and music, little West Wing. I do. But we'll lose our country. We will lose our country. You saw today, what is the President of the United States spending all his time on? He had a big press conference about the new design for the ballroom. Do not allow this to be normalized. It's a corruption story. That's the Trump administration. Period. Full stop.
For him to fly out there. Dana.
Yeah.
All right. Do you want to comment on the briefing room?
Yeah, I think, So when JD Vance said there's a way to ask a question, you don't have to give a speech. So, or it's like you stand up, say, like, I have a cat. It's like, okay, well, what's your question? But some of the reporters in the room obviously laughed. And one of the reasons is because if you're a regular at the briefing room, it's annoying when somebody stands up and gives a speech. And the other thing is, it reminds me of what Mike McCurry, who was Bill Clinton's press secretary, he was the first to allow cameras in the briefing room. Now, that might have been an inevitable situation because now cameras are everywhere. They're even in Greg's pocket filming him going down the street, and he didn't even realize. So what happened as soon as you brought cameras in is that now it's a performance. And it's not just a performance at the press secretary position, but in the briefing room as well. And you could usually tell what was going to be one of the first questions from the networks, because if you watch the networks, you can pay attention to what they're looking for. And how is that White House reporter going to make the news that night? How would they make sure that they're going to be the first in line to get one of those very narrow slots? And usually it was because they were doing some sort of performance. So that is one way to do it. If I could mention one thing on the fraud piece, I love that they are figuring out a way to get this out front and center. It's not something that was like, here, it's an assignment, and then also you have 25,000 other things that you're doing, and it'll just be one of the many things. No, he has figured out a way to say, okay, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to fully do it. It's sort of like when Kamala Harris got the assignment to go to the border or to handle the border czar, and then she basically tried to push it to the back burner. That is not what JD Vance is doing. And people do get very angry about their tax dollars being wasted. And they're able to show in the communications that they're doing exactly what they're trying to do to try to make it better so that taxpayers feel better about the money that they're spending. And also, if you care about the people that it's supposed to help, you should want more of this.
Yeah, I feel extra pressure to have my questions be short. Jesse, weigh in.
I want to talk about the allegation that Trump's trading stocks illegally.
Okay.
So you can see what he bought and when he bought it. It's all right here. There's nothing wrong with what he did. So they say he bought oil, okay? He bought oil after the ceasefire, when oil had gone down. Now, if there was something nefarious, he would have bought oil before the war and then sold it at its high and dumped it. He didn't do that. Everybody got into oil then. And then they say, oh, he bought gold, T-bills, and cash. Okay, that's what everybody did during the war. It's a hedge. It's a safe haven. If you're going to accuse him of doing anything wrong, he actually lost money. Some of these investments, I'm sure he's not proud of it. Some of these, the T-bills lost money. The gold ETF is actually down. Emerging markets, everybody's in emerging markets. It's nothing suspicious at all. So if you want to compare that to Nancy Pelosi, who came into office with no money, and then all of a sudden she earned $300 million. Well, how did she do that? Because Paulie P is her investment manager. Trump is not an investment manager. Paulie P founded an investment firm in San Francisco, which has made an absolute fortune in perfectly timed trades involving the tech sector, making call options. That's a very sophisticated trade. There's nothing in there like that. This is what anybody that has a diversified portfolio does with their money. It's basically the herd, not Paulie P. Paulie P is buying call options or put options on large technology companies that are involved with government contracts and government legislation. Nancy sleeps with them. You can't prove she talks to him before bed because how would you do that? You wouldn't even want to. But that's the beauty of it. It's like Beauty and the Beast. Paul's the Beast.
Okay, Greg, would you like to comment on Beauty and the Beast?
Never saw it. Don't have any interest in that crap.
Oh, you will.
Yeah, you know. Okay, so we're talking about fraud, and there's so much of it. It's hard to keep up, but we might be overlooking the biggest fraud against the American public in history, and we kind of like it got lost. And it's the Inflation Reduction Act, and I'll get to the reason why. But we just found out the other day that the UN rescinded all dire predictions regarding climate predictions after trillions were taken from taxpayers based on these corrupt forecasts that we were talking about here on the Five, saying this is BS, this isn't true, it can't be true. So all of these green policies and international aid and subsidies, they were all paid for. Everybody got rich off this, and it was from the taxpayers. It was called the Inflation Reduction Act. $400 billion in climate provisions that were dressed up as an inflation remedy. A double deception. It pretended to be about inflation, a lie. Number two, it pretended to do something about a major problem. It wasn't a major problem at all. So what did you end up with? Higher inflation because you printed more money, which is what we were saying is going to happen. So not only did it lie to the American people about the problem it was solving, it created the problem it claimed it was solving. Think about that when they started complaining about gas prices, Harold. Ooh, gas prices. Well, at least we know where the gas prices are coming from, and we know what the inflation rate really is and why it's there. You want fraud? Let's also talk about government meddling, right? If you look at the goods and the services over the last 25 years, what's gotten more expensive? What's gotten cheaper? TV, software, cell phone services, clothing, these are all cheaper. Isn't that strange? Especially when hospital services, college tuition, housing, childcare, nursing fees have all gotten more expensive. What's the difference? Government meddling. The more people you invite to oversee something, the more rent-seeking grift you're going to get. And that's what happened in all those things. You talk about healthcare being untenable. When did that happen? When did that happen? And you want to make universal healthcare? You're nuts. The amount of fraud is so vast, and we only know about it because of Doge and some kid named Nick Shirley, who did the job the journalists felt was beneath him. Every journalist should be ashamed whenever they hear the name Nick Shirley, because you were too busy chasing grannies in red hats and calling out people for misgendering some green-haired weasel. But meanwhile, Doge and Nick Shirley and the Chris Rufos of the world, they turned over the rock that you never wanted to.
Ooh, Harold.
So it's good to be with everybody. Harold. It's good to be with everybody. I have a different opinion today. I think that I ask our viewers and ask everybody around the table, put aside that this is President Trump in office today and say it's a Democrat in office. And you learn that a Democrat talked to the CEO of Micron, advised him on some things, then went and bought shares of his stock. You learn that that Democrat president talked to the CEO of Intel and said, we're going to make an investment the United States will, and then he went and bought the stock. I just think it's all wrong. Now, to the point about fraud, I applaud the vice president. I hope he not only finds all of it. I said from the outset when the Minnesota matter was first introduced here on this show, the chips, wherever the chips fall, let the chips fall where they may, and those who have had their hands in the jar the wrong way should be prosecuted, and if convicted, they should go to jail. But it doesn't seem right to me on this day, when you put this up, if we're going to criticize Ms. Pelosi, and she probably deserves some criticism, we have to be critical and be consistent here. Finally, it's been reported since we've been on the show, or maybe an hour ago, that the president worked out a deal with the DOJ that would allow his family to not have any matters that involve the IRS that they may have had some malfeasance with or not over the many years, that those matters would not be pursued by the IRS. Now, there are a lot of Americans who are being investigated right now by the IRS who think that they're right and that the IRS is wrong. The president has every right to believe that he's right and that they're wrong. But to have this be a part of a settlement, the president sued the Department of Justice. So essentially, he became the plaintiff and the defendant because it's his Justice Department. Then the Justice Department that reports to him worked out a deal with him to do this. If this were a Democrat, I'd be the first on the show saying something is very wrong here, and someone ought to investigate this. The president's my friend, and don't get me wrong, he remains my friend. But if he were a Democrat, I think we'd have a little different tone around the table about him and about the things that have been going on.
I think that's unfair.
Tell me why.
Because you're assuming that we
Well, you did it with
favorites.
Pelosi. You did it with.
I don't care about Pelosi. I actually
But you
don't
were
care about
critical.
any of this stuff. I care about the
Well, I do.
fraud that's being acted upon the American public. So nobody, you could be right.
I
But
don't think you're wrong about the fraud. I want that to be pursued. But in the same breath, Greg, if this were public officials, we can't say members of Congress shouldn't be trading, but the president can. We can't say that members of Congress can't gain information, non-public information, but the president. That's the only point I'm making. And at some point, it's going to be someone in office that you don't support. And I just hope, actually, I hope you change your mind on this issue, because this is a bad thing for the country, I think, if first allowed this.
Can I shed a bit of legal light on the DOJ situation, though, thanks to Carrier Bond from here? The issue was that the president, his tax returns were released, and that is a felony. That is a crime. And it has taken this amount of years for the IRS to identify who it was, and that's why the Trump family sued. So the settlement is because of the conundrum that you outlined, which is them realizing the plaintiff is indeed in control of the defendant
which
here.
a court would throw that out immediately.
That's why the settlement occurred, because it was sort of a legal, again, conundrum that was novel, that hadn't been seen before. They needed a resolution.
But Emily, the only leverage he had over them is that he could fire them. That no court would entertain this, because you can't be the plaintiff and the defendant.
That's why the resolution occurred as it did.
No, they did it because Blanche works for him. And I like Todd, but let's be on the level here if we're going to be on the level.
Be on the level.
much.
Just be on the level.
All right, coming up next.
Emily rocked your world just now.
Good to be the plaintiff and the defendant.
All right.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube, and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.